I want to present you an example of an evidence-based and policy-relevant publication. With the new Sustainable Development Agenda, it's now clear that we need evidence. Evidence is really recognized as important to inform policies. And the new agenda has also recognized the critical importance of monitoring in this agenda. So this is really where our report comes from. In May 2015, as a number of you knows, I don't know if a number of you knows, there was an important world forum, education forum that was organized in South Korea, and that brought together the education international community to both assess the progress that has been made towards education for all since 2000, and at the same time to set a new education agenda, a global education agenda. So from this important World Forum, there was a recognition of the work that the report has been done since 2002 of monitoring progress towards international goals. So our mandate really comes from that. So the mandate of the report is to monitor the education goals and its related targets in the new Sustainable Development goals frameworks, but also to look at the education aspects in other SDGs goals. So this is really the mandate that we have to implement through the Global Education Monitoring Report. It's an independent report that is published by UNESCO. So sometimes people just ask you, how can you be independent if you are published by UNESCO? So it's a UNESCO publication, but we are editorially independent. So the team report is based at the UNESCO headquarters in Paris. And the report is funded jointly by bilateral and multilateral agencies, including UNESCO, UNICEF, but also by international corporations like Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So we have a pool of funders that really believes in this report. So what do we mean by education, by evidence-based report, and how do we use evidence-based, research-based findings? To start with, I think it's important for us to recognize that research evidence, it's useful. It's useful because research really helps us to understand the world we live in, to explain it, and also to approach it. So there is no doubt for us that it's research evidence, it's important. So how do we use evidence from research? So as Monica said, there are different types of evidence out there. So the first kind of evidence we use is what we call data quantitative evidence. Because since our work is to monitor progress, meaning to map and chart trends over time at national, regional, and global levels, so we need data to do that. So the data we use come from a variety of sources, including administrative data that we get from the UNESCO Institute for Statistics that is based in Montreal in Canada. So we also use data from household surveys. Why? Because these data are really key for us because, as you know, in the new framework, equity is an important matter. So the goal will not be achieved if someone is left behind. So looking at household survey data enable us to do that. So we also use data from learning assessment because the education, the SDG 4 of education goals, it really has put learning at its center. So it's important for us to get data from learning assessment. So finally, the quantitative data we also use are what we call official development assistance data. So that help us to assess the international community commitment in terms of finance to the new agenda. So the second kind of evidence we use, it's qualitative evidence, because once we have charts quantitatively progress towards the target, we need to explain the trends over time. So the finding we get from research help us to do that. So because these findings also help us to know what works, what does not work in terms of policy. So it's really a tremendous type of evidence that we use. Research also help us in terms of highlighting with the research question. They help us to highlight particular important topics and emerging issues that we think that governments and international community have to pay attention to if the targets and the goals are to be achieved. And so how do we work and with research? So we work with expertise both internally and externally. Internally, the report team is made of a pool of research officers and policy analysts that really draft the report and develop it. So this is done through literature reviews, but beyond that, we also work with external academia and researchers around the world. We do this by commissioning background papers and studies, because from the start, we think that we don't have all the expertise we need in the team. So we have to work with people outside who knows better and more than we know, and who help us to really approach all the issues we are working on. So so it's really important to have this external work with others, because it's really important for us to make sure that we are really covering what has to be covered, and that we are not missing important issues. So it's really important to bring all this expertise, external expertise in. From research, we are research user, of course. As I said, we are using evidence from the research, but we are also research producers. What do I mean by that? It means that in addition of the, as I said before, of the literature reviews we also commissioning a bunch of sometimes original research pieces. And for example, the report is also a thematic report. So each time we commission think pieces to help us really understand, to increase our understanding and knowledge of the new issues we want to address. So, and this research projections is also important because researchers and academias themselves, they now use our research, our findings in their academic courses and in their research activities. So it's kind of mutual learnings, and it's a way for us also to bridge this science and policy and research gap. Not gaps, but to work on this interface between the two worlds. We have developed an important tools that also researchers outside and also policymakers are now using. It's what we call the World Inequality Database on Education. That it's really a tool for us that we use to draw attention to this persistent high level of inequality in education across countries, but also within countries themselves. Because as I said before, it's already important to make sure that no one is left behind. So we use that wide tools to do that. And we provide also this knowledge now to researchers and academics. So now that once we have these big reports, so I brought an example of that. This is a big report. So this is the last report we published last October, and the theme was accountability in education. So in the afternoon there will be a discussion on that, because we think that once the international commitments have been made towards specific goals, it's important to hold those who commit to make that happen, to hold them to account for what they are doing and what they have been doing, to make sure that education, for instance, because I'm talking of education will happen in 2030. So once we have these big reports, not all our audience can read these big reports, and including policymakers. So we have to think of other ways to disseminate our report findings and recommendations. So over the years, we have built a very strong and well-established communication strategy to really try to reach our audience, and among them, including policymakers, because at the end of the day, we want to influence policy and to inform policies. So we want to make sure that they read the report, and to avoid that the report ends itself on the shelf. So we have developing a variety of outputs. So we have a summary, an executive summary of the report. We also have now a youth version of the report, because we want the youth to really be involved. We also have a gender review, because gender equality is an important target and an important SDG goal. So we also have regional overviews, because the report is also an advocacy tool for all those who are working on education and want to push for it. So we provide them with all these materials for them to work and to really do what they have to do once the report is done. So we also have policy. We're also publishing policy papers. That is a way for us to try to influence policies. To take an example of these policy papers, in 2015, we published one on school-related gender-based violence. The aims of these papers was to try to understand the subject, to increase our understanding of that, to work on how to measure these issues. The objective of that was to come with, to identify clear indicators, and that helped to effectively monitor this subject. And this policy paper was really great for us, because it was used to develop an important resolution that the UNESCO, most of the UNESCO Executive Board country members have adopted in 2015, and to really call for governments to address these important issues in terms of gender equality in education, and also to try to end it. So it was a way, it's an example of, because earlier on, Monica said how to make sure that how can we assess the influence. So it's a way for us to assess the influence. So the work we are doing can make a difference, can influence. We are not that naive, because it's only one part of it. So there are a lot of other elements out there that can influence policies. But this is the way for us to do that. Another way we are working with communication is in terms of the language we use to write the report. Because once again, policymakers or even the general public, it's sometimes difficult for them to read research evidence as published by research papers. So I think it's important for us to use what we call plain English. So we are working a lot on the language. So now we have a report style, language style, that all researchers in the team are trained to write the report in order to come with something that is clearly understandable by the general public and by policymakers. So it's communication in terms of language is also important. Finally, I think communication also means to work with media, because media are an important transmission belt. They more and more now, they are themselves interested in research, findings and evidence, and they are conveying all these research findings to the general public. So we are working with the media. Why is it that important? Because at the end of the day, we also want them to make sure that they are really understanding what we want, what we are saying in the report. So it's kind of mutual beneficial. So the media for us are an important vehicles for us to transmit, to disseminate our message. But it's also because they can also inform policies. So it's a way for us to look at this, the question of how to bridge science and policy. Let me stop here. Thank you.